this paper attempts to highlight the nuances of different approaches that are emerging over the question of data ownership. There are three stakeholders in the debate on data ownership, that is the state, market, and individual, and three different approaches, that is the Chinese, American, and the European approach that is emerging over the question of data ownership, giving more importance to one stakeholder over the others. We will talk about the nuances of all of these approaches. But before we start talking about or evaluating each of these stakeholders as the owner of data, we have to deal with a fundamental question, that is data emerging as a new means of production? And if it is emerging as a new means of production, what kind of impact it will have on the socio-economic and political systems. So we know that since the beginning of human civilization, the production chain has served as a fundamental structure for the functioning of a society in all aspects of human life. Now, this chain, of course, the production chain is always dependent on the basic means of production. And whenever a change happens in the this basic means of production, because of, let's say, any scientific or technological development, it changes the production relations completely, and the division of labor gets restructured in the process, and which transforms the existing social, political, cultural, and economic institutions in order to accommodate the changing needs of human society. So we know with the discovery of fire, societies changed. Then after the invention of iron tools, the agrarian societies came into existence. Then we had, invention of printing press, which had its own impact on the socio-political systems. Then, oceanic navigation and all kind of scientific developments that took place during the period of Renaissance. Then the invention of steam engine again changed this basic means of production, because now machines became a basic means of production. It led to the capitalist and the industrial establishment of capitalist and industrial societies. Now this shift in basic means of production has again took place because of the information and technological revolution, which was followed by the information and communication revolution in the 20th century. Now what do we mean by this? That today in the post-industrial society, the data which is created by computers and the internet has itself become a new means of production. And as we discussed, that whenever such shift happens in the basic means of production, it brings an epistemological break in the functioning of human society. And now, in the 21st century, internet and data are playing an unprecedented role in the reconstruction of social and political order. Now with this, there's a newfound realization on the question of ownership, distribution, and protection of data all across the world. So now there are three stakeholders in the data ownership question, and we are going to discuss the nuances of ownership by each of them one by one. Now first, let us talk about state as the owner of data. We know that after the Renaissance, the basic understanding in society about the origin of state, it shifted from divine theory to the social contract theory, in which, individuals would submit the share of their production in the form of taxes to the state, and state in return would provide security of life and property by establishing law and order in society. Now, if the state is democratic, it becomes a natural responsibility of the state to protect the fundamental rights of citizens, like liberty, equality, justice, and privacy. And now when, there are new scientific development taking place and markets are creating new needs, these rights which were protected by the state earlier that we talked about, like liberty, equality, justice, privacy, the state should naturally extend these rights to digital platforms. And this would make state the natural guardian of data, and as it would have happened in a conservative system, state would have the ability to control access to data in order to promote public welfare. Now, here there are many fundamental questions that emerge in this regard. One question is, of course, is data a public good? And if it is a public good, what role should state play in this public good? But at the same time, it is important to highlight the question around the privatization of state-owned data. Now, data privatization happens when the state or the public sector that has the legitimacy to collect our data, and of course the state can make this process mandatory for citizens, when the state is able to share or sell this data to the free market. So what kind of concerns that would emerge in this regard? And also there's another concern that's related to the question is monitoring of digital footprints, as data is now being used for surveillance by the state and revenue generation by businesses like never before. But if we let the state own and control the data, we face the challenge of undermining the role of market in invention of the internet and data itself. The potential of utility plays the most important role in development of any resource, and if you restrict access to people's data and market, it could actually limit the further innovations that are required to accommodate the needs of information society. Now if but the main question here is that the market works for profit maximization, and it might not be concerned about protecting democratic ethos in the process. Now there have been several examples in the recent past where major tech corporations prioritize their business interest in a way that crushed the legitimacy of democratic elections and public narratives. We know what happened with the Cambridge Analytica case, where this UK-based firm was able to gather personal information of 87 million users from Facebook and influence them in swinging the elections in the favor of one candidate. And in fact, Facebook CEO Mark Zuckerberg admitted it, to the US State Senate that the tech giant failed to prevent the firm from doing so. That raises serious concern. But the third approach that has emerged is about the individual being the owner of data. And this is based on a very fundamental argument that data is data, an inalienable part of human body. Now, following this theoretical premise, one can argue that the individual, being the creator of data, should be able to decide what to do with it and who can access it. Now, we know that GDPR by EU has taken this approach, and they have granted a number of new rights to the citizens. But the biggest challenge to the consent based this framework regarding individual being owner of the data is about like whether individual decide on what to do with data and who can access it, and if at all, if individual is allowed to decide, is individual capable to take these decisions? And if individual is capable, then whether consent with knowledge is enough. Now, there are two concerns that emerge here. One is the concern from the societies where the digital literacy level is low. How do you implement these frameworks in those society? And second, with the rapid advancement of technologies, is the implementation of consent for data collection processes is actually practical or possible? And again, there's another question that emerges here again, is data a public good? Now, in this regard, there are a number of debates and nuances that are emerging in digital democracies, which is leading towards digital sovereignty dilemmas, and the policy contradictions within the states over the question of data ownership. So first is about the question of shared ownership. Now, the whole idea of single ownership came after the establishment of industrial society, and it was developed to cater the needs of capitalist and industrial society, because the family structures were changing and the model of means of productions were changing. But one has to argue and question that whether the single ownership perspective is practical or possible in the data driven societies, and that is why it gives the scope, it basically there's a scope to examine the shared ownership perspective in the post-industrial society, and that would require the reappropriation of utility perspective as well. Now, the second question is about diversity by design, because we know that the focus of the policy so far is on privacy by design, but the way artificial intelligence is being developed on such a rapid scale, that might require the frameworks on diversity by design itself, because otherwise it might create serious problems in the diverse societies. The third very important question is about algorithmic hegemony. Now, we know that those who control the basic means of production also control dominant values of art, literature, culture, morality, and ethics in the society. Now, due to rapid advancement in artificial intelligence and machine learning in the last few years, data processed by algorithm is also becoming a tool to influence the needs and choices and preferences of individuals. We know that Foucault said that knowledge is power, and the source of knowledge in contemporary times is information collected and delivered through these algorithms, which means that the big tech platforms can now influence dominant values of art, literature, culture, morality, and ethics in the society. And that is why the concerns are emerging. On their capacity to control the public discourse by restricting, let's say, access to some specific information or providing counter information access. We keep reading about that in newspapers. So in this context, the classical theoretical frameworks on the concept of hegemony needs to be re-examined to understand the nature and scope of algorithmic hegemony. The other concern that's emerging is on the question of digital sovereignty. Now, this is the word which is used by governments to convey the idea that states should reassert their authority over the internet, and they should protect the citizens and businesses in the digital sphere. But within that, the major debate that is emerging is over ex ante versus ex post regulation. So ex ante regulation is before the event, and ex post regulation is after the event. Now, so far the pattern has been about ex post regulations, but we have, like, suddenly now we see that there's a lot of focus on ex ante regulations, which means to just to predict what might go wrong with these technologies, and to put legal framework in place in this regard. But in the developing societies, there is another debate which comes with ex ante versus ex post regulation. That is it too early and too much, or is it too late and too little when it comes to introduce new laws and policies to regulate these technologies? So these are some of the debates and nuances that are emerging in this regard. Thank you very much.